All right, happy 2025. I've been thinking a lot about teaching on YouTube, and so today I've decided to do something quite different. I'd like to talk about my music teaching philosophy. Many of you by now have already left the chat, but I'm going to talk about this anyway. When you're teaching on YouTube, you don't get an opportunity to go into depth in many cases, and so rather than try to fiddle around teaching a lesson and teach some of these principles during a lesson, I've decided to give you essentially what amounts to the subtext of every lesson that I teach. And so, and what I mean by that, it becomes a philosophy of teaching, and it's not only my personal philosophy. It's the philosophy of any good teaching, and where good teaching will lead. Good teaching should lead to results, and a good teacher should know how to achieve those results. So from a music perspective, I'm just going to jump in here. I'm going to go through each of these elements, each of these points. And, sorry, these are indisputable. I get comments on YouTube that are just out in outer space sometimes. These elements that I'm going to cover right now have been pretty much the same for the last 300 years. And so I just want to share this with you as a start to the new year. So let's begin with I've written here the elements. What are the elements of music? The elements of music are rhythm, time, melody, harmony, and form. Just to keep it simple. Now, the reason I do them in that order is because this is the way they would have developed historically speaking. Like somebody would have been beating on a drum, in 6000 BC, and then they would have probably discovered that there was a tempo or a gradation of time. There would have been fast and slow and so on. And these rhythms, look it up. We could do 4 hours in just rhythm and the study of rhythm. But what I'm talking about is the elements of music. So when I teach, I have to be aware of rhythm and time, and I would hope that I'm imparting something in the way of rhythm and time. The next, in terms of historically speaking, would be melody. Melody is that thing that we whistle or sing or think of when we think of a specific tune. We can do a little bit of the tune, and it becomes a part of our vernacular, of our musical vernacular, of our musical language. You can sing or whistle a little bit of a melody, and everybody knows what it is. It doesn't require chords. It doesn't require anything other than just a little chunk of the melody, and you remember that. That's what a melody is. So that has to be an element in terms of teaching, in terms of imparting that to a student. The ability to recall melody, the ability to express melody on, in this case, the fretboard. And what just comes to mind. I've actually had students that have played for up to 20 years, and they couldn't play a melody for me. They couldn't play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, because all they'd ever done was play rhythm. Chords, power chords, and that kind of stuff. And then harmony. What is harmony? Harmony is when you take notes from a linear reproduction or a linear expression of music, being scales, right? Organized pitches. and you create chords, and those chords have movements, and those chords normally support melody, and the melody is supported by the chords in a specific rhythm or time. Now, we're not talking anything stylistically here to begin with. Like I'm not talking about jazz or rock or pop or classical, or I'm talking about all music generally in the Western world. This is what you get. And then there's form. How long is this going to happen? Is there going to be an A section and a B section? Is there going to be an A, a B, and a C section? Is there going to be an introduction? Is there going to be an outro? What is the form? Right? How do these other elements take place? And so this is just a very small responsibility of someone who's teaching music, to impart these ideas to the student and have the student recall, remember, and be able to explain those ideas both musically and with their speaking, so they can also communicate that to someone else if the case is that they also want to teach someone else. Okay, so these are not necessarily in order, but progressive development and skills development. So obviously what you want to do is be able to organize whatever it is you're doing in let's say scales, right? You want to be able to understand how things are expressed on the guitar fretboard, and so you learn scales, you learn chords, you learn arpeggios, and you learn to develop those so that you can play them at a specific tempo and so on. So these things are the foundation on which you build music, right? Practicing scales isn't music. Practicing chords isn't music. Practicing your arpeggios isn't music. But these are the elements that music is made out of. So if we, for instance, take intervallic relationships, arpeggios, scales, chords, and now those things are expressed by playing a melody or playing a specific harmonic progression. Then what we're doing is developing an understanding, and we have to do that with a methodology, with a certain approach to how we practice and how we input into our fingers and our minds a perfect input, like a perfect way of learning and of programming our central nervous system to spit out what we want to spit out when we demand that to happen. Now, so I just mentioned sort of progressive and systematic. This progressive and systematic idea can happen with learning a song. It can happen with learning your arpeggios up and down the fretboard. It doesn't matter. So in other words, you need a program, a systematic and progressive program of practice, which takes time and time frames. I've often used this in my own teaching. You're not going to learn anything. Let's say you want to be a bodybuilder. If you want to be a bodybuilder and you want to tighten up your stomach muscles, and I don't know why I'm using that. That's a bad example for me personally. If you want to tighten up your stomach muscles, you're going to do one sit-up a day, right? And you're going to get tight. You're going to look like buff, right? No, you're not. Well, let's escalate that to two sit-ups a day. And you can just check yourself in the mirror. Spend more time checking yourself in the mirror than you actually do doing sit-ups. And my guess would be that it would be better to do more sit-ups than to keep looking in the mirror. Okay, well, I think we can all agree with that. Well, how about 10 sit-ups a day. Maybe at that point, something might start happening. How about 20 sit-ups a day? Well, you know what? Music is no different than that. If you expect to progress with, by dabbling at it on the couch, it's never going to happen. You may learn one happy little bit of one little song, but you'll never get to the point where you can play. What is theory? There's a lot of confusion as to what theory is. What it is it begins to explain the fundamentals of the language. That's not taking it as far as harmony. That's not taking it as far as composition. That's not even, that's not nearly taking it as far as public performance. Theory just gives us the fundamentals, the foundation of the language and how to understand it. And then we take that language and we interpret it with this here, right here on the fretboard. From here all the way up to there, we interpret it. Not from here to the 3rd fret, right? We use the entire fretboard to interpret this language. Audio understanding harmonically, the numbering system. So what does that mean? That means that, and I should say audio understanding harmonically and melodically, when you can play a melody that comes from here out of your head and you can put it down on the fretboard, that's where you want to get to. That's sort of a bare minimum. Just take any melody and take it and put it down on the fretboard. I don't care how simple that melody might be. And understanding harmonically is different. Understanding harmonically is being able to hear the chords that happen behind the melody. So that's why we teach in a numbering system, like a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, and a 1 chord. So I'm in the key of C, 4 chord, 5, and 1 chord. Those chords come from the scale of C major, and the same thing applies in every single key. So it's not. These are concepts that are essential to understand and learn, because it's the way music works. Again, this is not a stylistic consideration. If you want. If you want to play them in bar chords, maybe that, just fifths, maybe that's a stylistic consideration, but it's still a 1-4-5 chord progression. And so this idea of a numbering system is really something you have to understand. We sort of touched on scales, chords, and arpeggios, but with each of those, you need a system of practice. Now, here I'm going to say that if you just want to play an accompaniment style, right? If you want to just play in an accompaniment style, you could get really good in that style. But if you want to start soloing, if you want to play solo guitar parts, not only single note solos with a band, right? But if you want to learn how to play in a solo style, you do that by practicing your scales, chords, and arpeggios in a very systematic and progressive way. You have organized your time so it works in seeing results on the fretboard. Okay, and here's another one: reading notation, not tablature. So if you think you're reading tablature, and that's what, and that is the way you want to read music, I've got news for you. Tablature doesn't tell you the time that you're playing in. It doesn't tell you the key you're playing in, and you can't communicate with other musicians. So it's a useless, pretty much. And no, not entirely useless. It can be. It does have its uses. But if you really want to learn how to play, learn how to read. Take the time to learn how to read, at least at an elementary level. And it's not that much to ask. And just learn how to read in open position. and learn a melody, be able to input stuff into your brain that you can pull out later and play. Okay, and getting out of visual references such as patterns. I can't tell you how many times on YouTube somebody says the pentatonic scale, and they go like this. I mean, maybe 50 times, right? Like, why is that? Is that the only pentatonic scale on the planet? I mean, that scale happens all over the fretboard. Why is it that everybody plays it in the middle of the fretboard with just, in the key of A minor? It blows my mind. I'll tell you why. Because they see it. They see it. They don't hear it. They see it as a pattern, right? But that same scale is played all over the fretboard. So this idea of saying this is the visual pattern, this is the shape of this chord, those are visual references, and it's about your ears. It's not about your eyes. Okay, moving on. Music as a language. You have to, it's written, spoken, heard, interpreted, and communicated. So as a teacher, again, I would hope that you can speak a language that you can communicate with somebody else. That seems to make sense. The music is a language, and this is the instrument. That means it interprets the language of music. So if you don't understand the language you're teaching, there's nothing to interpret here, okay? So it's important to be able to hear, to educate your ear, to hear chord progressions, to educate your ear to hear melodies, to take those chord progressions and melodies and put them down on the fretboard, no matter what they might be. The guitar is an instrument of interpretation for that language. Yes. Stylistic understanding, differences, cross-relation and accompaniment, solo guitar and combo playing. Yikes, that's so much. Stylistic understanding means that there's a difference between country and rock and roll. There's a difference between classical playing and jazz playing, and but they all use the same elements. But later on, as you learn interpretation and as you grab a style that you really love to play, you will understand some of the idioms of that style, like what makes that style individual, what makes that style what it is, what makes it a style that you like, or that is recognized by listeners as being that specific style. And cross relation. What I mean by cross relation is if you learn how to play jazz standards, right? Like, let's say you go to a college music program, even though there are almost none left. So let's say you go to a college music program and you play, you learn how to play, simple jazz tunes, right? And you learn the melodies, whatever they might be. Just because you're learning that style doesn't mean it doesn't relate to all of the other styles. It does, maybe not so much in classical, but it does relate to. It's going to relate to country. It's going to relate to rock and roll, to pop, to whatever. And that's why they use jazz in the college programs. Not so that you're going to turn out a whole bunch of jazz players, but so you'll turn out players that understand how music works, how the language works, how chord progression works, and so on and so on. So there's a cross-relation aspect. It's not, just because you're learning how to play Satin Doll doesn't mean that that's where you're going to be trapped and you'll never be able to learn to use a D minor 7 and a G7 for anything else. No, there's cross-relation. And ask yourself, do I just want to learn how to accompany my singing? If you just want to learn how to accompany your singing, don't waste a whole ton of time on learning your arpeggios up and down the fretboard. You know, if you want to be a serious guitar player, yeah, you have to do those things, but not if you just want to bang out some chords in open position. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you know, it can be a ton of fun, especially if you can sing or if you want to write tunes, right? Solo guitar playing is a whole other different trip. Me by myself playing a song by myself. I'm playing the melody, the chords, the rhythm, you know, the time, everything. That takes a considerable amount of more of practice than it would, for instance, to play in an accompaniment style. Ask yourself what you want to do and what you're willing to spend the time on, because being a solo guitarist. No, I'm not talking about playing in a band and wailing with the pentatonic scale. I'm talking about being able to play melodies. And there's some lovely players even on the web, you know, that can do that. Ask yourself if you want to do that and if you're willing to put in 10,000 hours. And combo playing, combo playing, different trip again. If you're just, you know, if you're comping and you're and there's a horn player playing the melody, right? You know, and all you're doing is comping in a style like that, you know, cool. So try to define, and then playing single note lines, you know. Try to define what it is that you want to do, what really turns you on, and practice the things that are necessary for that. Technique, repetition, and plural practice. What technique means is the physical aspect of playing the instrument. In order to keep your chops alive and happening, you're going to have to get onto a program of, you know, scales, chords, whatever the case might be. If you just want to play in open position, then there's stuff that you can do in, you know, if you're just playing accompaniment, that you should be doing in open position. Like playing 1, 6, 4, 5 chord progressions in the 5 most common keys, C, A, G, E, and D. That's an absolute necessity. You have to be able to do that. Take my word for it. The reason I'm saying stuff like this is because I've taught for on and off for 40 years, right? And I've had the experience, the visceral experience of teaching every age level, and I know where most people are at. And I'm not talking about just very locally. People, you know, I'm talking about big cities, and people would, in some cases, drive many miles to have a lesson with me. So technique, repetition means perfect repetition, clean repetition, absolutely no mistakes, same ascending, same descending. You're programming your muscle memory. And plural practice means you're doing more than one thing at a time. If I were, for instance, I don't know, I'm just thinking of something off the top of my head. Plural practice would be, let's say I'm practicing my C major scale, but I want to include my right hand. There, plural practice. I've got 16ths going on in my right hand, and I've got my C major scale nice and clean with my left hand. That would be plural practice. I'm getting twice as much happening there that way. And there's 100 different ways to plural practice. So ask yourself if your practice is really really being used, if your time is being used to its ultimate potential. So copying as one element to creativity. So you're playing in a cover band, or you want to play a song just exactly like the recording. I mean, go ahead. But that has very, very limited potential for actually being an improvising, creative musician. But there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're going to do it, make sure that you're ready to do that. Now, what I mean by that is if you're not ready to do that, if the player that you're trying to copy has been playing for 20 years and you just started playing 6 months ago, don't try to copy him. I don't know what, first of all, get some of the basic fundamentals underneath your fingers before you start, trying to copy Steve Vai's licks. And then playing by ear. What is this and how do I develop it? Start with simple songs, right? Start with, if you want to copy something from a recording, which is, by the way I started playing, and it has its shortcomings and it has some very strong benefits at the same time. If you want to learn to play by ear, before you do anything, make sure that you understand some fundamentals of harmony and theory. In other words, if you can identify a tonal center and say you discover you're in the key of D. There I am in the key of D. I discovered that this song is in the key of D. This is my tonal center. I'm in the key of D. So immediately I say to myself, what's the 4 chord in the key of D? It's G. What's the 5 chord? Is A. And D is the 1 chord. What's the 2 chord in the key of D? It's E minor. Right? And what's the 6 chord? It's B minor. So, and then you should be able to also hear some simple things like suspensions. Right? And if you can start to recognize those things by ear, then, if you recognize where your tonal center is, then you can from the tonal center extrapolate where you're going to end up going. You're going to go to the 4 chord. You're most likely going to go to the 5 chord. You will very likely go to the 6 or the 2, right? And so what you're starting to do is you build an understanding. If I take the same thing in the key of G, I made a discovery. I'm in the key of G. So that means that my 4 chord will be C, my 5 chord will be D, and then I've got a large part of the progression, because it's always going to be essentially the same. You may end up with a flat 7 chord, which you have to learn to hear as well. So start with a basic foundation of the understanding of harmony before you jump into playing by ear. I'll skip that. Learn some terms. Learn what they mean. I use them all the time in my videos. Voice leading. What does voice leading mean? Voice leading means that I can take a chord like this, and then if I move to the 4 chord, and then to the 5 chord, and back to the 1. What do each of the voices do? You see, each one of those chords has a voice, right? Those are called voices. So in this case, when I go to the 4 chord, my bottom voice goes up a tone. My top voice goes up a semitone, and my middle voice remains static or in common. And then if I move to the G, right, I know this voice moves down here, I know this voice moves down here, and I know this voice moves down to here, right? And so you learn to hear chords as a group of voices that are heard together. I mentioned the word tonal center. You have to learn to hear the tonal center. Polyphonic means that's what this instrument is. It's a polyphonic instrument. It's a lap piano. Understand it that way. If all you can do is play super fast single note lines, you should have probably stuck to saxophone. Okay, moving on, understanding how to converse in the musical language. Yeah, you get together with other people, you've got a piano player there, and all you know how to do is play from tablature. Good luck. Okay, but I think it would probably be a much better idea to be able to say to the piano player, this is a 1-4-5 chord progression in the key of D, and it's just 8 measures long before it gets to the B section. He will understand what you're talking about because you're communicating in a common language. Okay, and time frame and time use, that really has more to do with how to practice, moving ahead systematically and progressively. And I talked about that at the beginning. And last, just one little thing that I'd like to say. If you can't play it, I know this from my own experience, not as a teacher, but as a player when I was learning. A teacher once said to me, if you can't play it, you don't know it. Now that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Like I was flummoxed once with one of my teachers, and I said I just can't play this, and he said, well, that's because you haven't practiced it enough. You might want to take that one away. And are teachers performers? Yes, they can be. And in some cases, teachers are not performers. In some cases, and this goes for musicians, I had a great teacher once who was not a performer, but an absolutely stellar classical guitar teacher, and who got more students than anyone else in the Toronto district. For those of you who are Torontonians, you may know who I'm talking about. He had his own studio in the middle of the city, and is teaching a separate discipline. Now, I don't mean to suggest that with the teachers and performers that a teacher can't be a performer, but to assume that a performer can be a teacher is a stretch. Performing is a very different discipline than teaching is. Teaching is a whole different trip. You have to get into the mind of the student, and that's where YouTube is such a weird thing. Because I can't hear you, I can't see you, I don't know what you know. And YouTube has just got this attention span of a I don't know what, I better not say it, attention span of people that don't have an attention span. And teaching requires an attention span. Teaching requires having someone sitting in front of you and being able to hear them, being able to watch their technique and discuss where they want to go and so on. I have none of that. So, it's YouTube is really not the format for teaching, but I hope you've learned something today. I hope that I've imparted something, and I felt a necessity to do this after having done this YouTube thing for a couple of years. And there are moments where I think, well, this might be a fun thing to continue with. Keeps the guitar in my hands, and I might be imparting something that's of value to someone out there. But most people don't even take the time to comment, and so that sort of is a problem. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's this: I just don't spend enough time noodling around on cross platforms and with fancy pictures and stuff. I have no idea. It's sort of a weird place to get to when that you used to have teach 50 or 60 students a week, and they'd be knocking the door down to get a position, and now I have people suggesting stuff that. Sometimes, in some cases, it's very nice, and I'm glad to hear their comment. But in other cases, it's not very nice, and it's done with a real lack of understanding. So, on that note, yeah, it's 2025, and I think I'm going to continue this for a little while more, and we'll see how it goes. I do appreciate your comments, and keep them positive, because I will not deal with any more negative comments. I can't do it, man. Not at this stage in my life. Just don't need it. And but just a nice note, or if there's something you learned, or if there's something you'd like to learn, or if you have a question, I'm happy with all of that, right? But if you think you know more than anyone else, talk to somebody else. Okay. And so, yeah, I don't know what's come over me really with this 2025 year. I think it's a matter of what's going on everywhere, and you just sort of start getting worn out. So I hope this wasn't too terribly negative. I really do. But these are the facts, and I really felt the necessity to do one video that gave you an idea of what I think of in every lesson I teach. What elements am I imparting to the students that are out there? How is this going to be of value to them, right? So yeah, there's a few things to keep in mind. Okay, thank you for stopping by, and have a wonderful new year. See ya.